Hi, welcome to episode 91 of Talk About the Passion. We are now into the 90s. Exciting stuff, right? Speaking of the 90s, my guest today is Damien Moyal, who is making his second appearance here. Damien has spent time in a number of bands, including As Friends Rust, Culture, On Bodies, Damien Done, and a bunch more. And as far as this episode, I invited him on to discuss his new project, Ekstasis, a death metal project that just released a 4-track EP. The music's great. Four tracks, as I said, 3 are originals and a Morgoth cover. He tells us where you can find this to buy or listen to, and I'll also include links if you follow me on social media. We also get pretty deep into what it's like to spend time in the hardcore world and the metal world from a young kid through being an adult. And another theme has come up a lot in recent episodes is how younger people listen to music and can buy music nowadays, and sort of the differences through generations of music fans, young and old, and how we've done that. I love talking music with him, as the 2 episodes we've done so far. You can tell, as well as through chats with him and online social media. I highly recommend checking out some of his other bands as well, especially Damien Done, which is a really cool, sort of dark, new wave type band that's, creates a mood that he actually describes pretty well in this episode, sort of comparing it to 80s style videos. Anyway, yeah. I've also included part of a song from the Ekstasis release here as well at the end, so listen through to hear that. I think you'll dig it if you're a death metal fan for sure. You can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and keep those up to date as much as I can. Just search for Talk About the Passion podcast. And if you like what you hear, give me a follow on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and even drop a review if you're into that kind of thing. Okay, that's enough from me. Let's go. Episode 91. Thanks for listening. So I am here with Damien Moyal again for a second tour of duty here. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good. You?
Good. Thanks. Thanks for doing this again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And we're doing this on the heels of the release of a death metal project going now called Ekstasis. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, Ekstasis. I think it's a Greek word, and I think it's supposed to be like Ekstasis, but
okay,
we're never going to say it like that. So.
Right.
I don't expect anyone else to.
Right. So how did this project come about?
I just kind of in texting back and forth with Dave Williams, who is the guy who so far has done all of the instrumentation stuff and the vast majority of the writing. We've been friends for a while, and we were kind of going back and forth about, I don't know, something, and the idea just came up of like, sort of in jest, like, oh, we're going to need to do a death metal band, aren't we? And then before I knew it, he kind of like within a couple of days had the first song pretty much written, and then within a few weeks there was the whole 4-song thing. One's a cover, but still it moved really fast, and
yeah, it fits in with the. I mean, it definitely fits in with the whole demo.
Right. Yeah, it should be sort of a impromptu sort of. Maybe jumping the gun in some ways, just kind of
right.
Rushing to it, and that's part of what's fun about the demo.
And has he played with other people as well, Dave?
Yeah, he's and that was sort of the thing. Like he's done a bunch of bands, I've done a bunch of bands, but we, in spite of like kind of coming from death and thrash backgrounds, had never done like a proper metal band,
right.
Like a band that's more in line with like where we came from.
Yeah, yeah.
So he was in a band called Crusades.
Okay.
They were on No Idea for a while, I think. Bunch of stuff. He's from Ontario, Canada. So he was also in a band called Black Tower, and he most recently was in a project called Surrender that was doing kind of erasure-ish, like synthy,
nice.
pop kind of stuff. So yeah, again, obviously none of that really, metal, like real, just kind of, let's not stylize this or hardcoreize this. Let's just do metal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
because you also have the Damien Done stuff, which I love that, by the way.
Thanks.
It's cool to see all these different faces. Obviously we're friends on Facebook, and I see a lot of the stuff you listen to, and cool to see you able to put a metal, like an actual metal thing together, and not like you just said, like it's like a goth thing but with a metal edge, or there's no like irony, or which is
and I think, some people have said that they do hear kind of hardcore influences. I guess maybe my delivery is just going to be kind of what it is, because that's just what I came up yelling, but in bands. But I think it's pretty much, we're just setting out to like write the kind of metal that we remember loving as adolescents, as far as like more extreme metal goes. But obviously it's going to be not intentionally, but I'm sure it's informed by kind of everything else that we like and play. But yeah, the deal kind of in those early conversations was just nothing too melodic. I think he's into a lot more of that kind of mellow death, at the gatesy kind of stuff than I ever was. It's not like his main thing, but I actively like disliked that kind of, death metal for a long time. But so we wanted a little bit of melody, but not to tip too far in that direction. And then it was like, let's also, we both love the kind of the death bands that still have like a lot of their thrash kind of showing,
right?
Like death thrash, thrashier death stuff.
Right.
So it was like, let's also not try to be too squarely a death metal band, because there's a lot of death metal happening right now, and there's a big old school death metal kind of resurgence, and that stuff's great. That's still the stuff that I guess I prefer listening to. But yeah, we didn't want to be too squarely a death metal band either, because we both kind of wanted. I always liked those bands that like really walked the line, where you were never quite sure what they were, whether it was like black metal or thrash with like Sodom, or bands like Slayer, who there's always been a lot of debate about. Like, some people will argue that they're more or less a death metal band, which to me is kind of crazy. They're a thrash band, but they did have that same sort of appeal and spirit.
Yeah,
like,
fit right in with that world.
Yeah. Sepultura, another one, where it's like, so that was kind of something that we didn't want to shy away from either. We were like, hey, if it feels like we just need to get creator-ish or something for a minute, let's not say no. That's not it's not by the book kind of death metal stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I'm not really sure what it is. I just know that it's a lot more metal than anything I've ever done.
Yeah. And when you originally, you had messaged me a few months ago, and you sent me these tracks, and you said, hey, you should get really stoned and listen to this. We were talking about it, and then at one point you said, it's one of the few genres that accepts older musicians. So, why do you think that is with metal?
Well, I guess, save for the kind of the kind of wild in the streets kind of headbangery thing. Yeah. I think it's not a scene that's predicated. It's not a youth movement necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
It was rebellious and it was shocking, but they didn't like try to attach youth to it the same way we do in like hardcore and punk.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we're like really just, it's like we're trying to make it, you know, expire or something. But
Yeah.
in metal, I think it's like there just was none of that. And then you have the bands that were revered in like the 80s or whatever are still revered, so their age isn't kind of working against them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it doesn't cycle out like in the hardcore scene where it's definitely the crowd stays younger in hardcore, where when you go to see metal shows, you know, the crowd has aged. There's young people there too, but there's also, you know, a lot of old dudes, which when you see a lot of old dudes at a hardcore show, they're usually kind of creepy dudes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's also just more of a kind of life. I feel like even if people stay, you know, hardcore for their whole lives or whatever, at a certain point that becomes like hardcore by way of like, you know, still collecting records and
Right.
t-shirts
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
But in terms of like, you know, like especially in Europe, and I'm, you know, from what I can tell, like South and Central America too, where just metal is it's never not been huge. You know, where in the States we sort of like buried it for a decade or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still just like, and it's like a lifelong thing where they just like, you know, some German guy gets into metal, you know, in his teenage years, he's still out there like at some bar right now in Germany with like long hair that's only growing around the sides,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. The
like
skull.
not giving
Yeah.
a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, just
So you're it's you and Dave, but now you've added Fred Estby is gonna play drums.
yeah. So that's
pretty awesome.
very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. I you know, well, you had him on the podcast,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, you know, very nice, approachable guy.
Yeah.
I really only kind of knew him through Nathaniel.
Yeah.
And, you know, just vaguely, but I felt comfortable enough sending him the demo, and then I followed up and was like, you know, made some joke about how I was secretly hoping he'd love it enough that he wanted to play drums on the whatever we do next. And he was like, yeah, he basically was like, no, I really dig it, and I'd totally be down to do something.
That's rad.
That was, yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's we have this thing coming out that's just me and Dave, and then whatever we do next, we'll have Fred and maybe somebody else too. I don't know. We're still.
Yeah. And you know, when I had him on, one of the things he talked about, because he was in that, you know, if the listener doesn't know, Fred is the longtime drummer of Dismember, and but he talks a lot about when he was first getting into the scene in Europe, and tape trading was sort of the way that you found out about bands. You know, friends would literally get together at a bar and like be like, hey, I got this tape from, you know, Japan, and this one's from, you know, the United States, and that's pretty cool that you know, he's in this band, and you guys are, this record you're putting out as a cassette at first, and then it's going to be on vinyl later.
Yeah, the cassette is on Unspeakable Acts. They're a imprint subsidiary. I don't know. The Dark Descent is their parent label, so they have like some pretty good bands under the extended family. But Unspeakable Acts, I think, is like their imprint for like yeah, I guess just kind of weirder thrash or death or like blackened, you know, stuff or whatever. The stuff that's kind of like, let's see how this does, you know, or but or just a little bit, you know, varied in taste from the other stuff. But yeah, he had worked with Dave on a Black Tower thing, I think. So Dave knew him and sent him the stuff. And then the vinyl will be on, I think we're actually going to be the first release on this new label that is a metal spin-off of Destructure
Okay.
in France.
Yep.
Yeah. So they're if they run this metal thing, anything like they run Destructure, I think will be in good hands because they've got some really good bands on that label and nice work. So yeah, it's supposed to be, I think, maybe just death metal that they end up releasing. I'm pretty excited. It all came together like very very fast.
Yeah. And then we were talking about like getting into. You've been collecting cassettes. What you started doing? When did you start doing that again? Like you like reignited that your cassette collection in the last few years, or
Just in the last few years, yeah.
yeah,
It was more just kind of there were a few tapes from my youth that I just kind of wanted to hold again, in my hand and like just see if it kind of, I don't know, sometimes you just want some nostalgia to like make you feel a little weird,
yeah, yeah, definitely.
like driving by the house you grew up in
yeah, of course,
or whatever. So yeah, there was something I was like, I think it was Eye for an Eye was maybe what I started with, where I was like, because I had a big physical connection to that tape as a kid. So I was like, I want to get that again, the Caroline, the same version that I had, and just like, unfold the J card and see if it does something weird, and it did. It was good. And then I was like, oh yeah, what other tapes do I have? And I started like buying them all again. This was like it might have been just before. No, I think it was like during it, maybe at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, started.
Yeah, so it started as just kind of a, I can afford to order a tape or two here and there just to kind of rebuild whatever collection I can remember having had, and as a new tape pops into my memory, I'll be like, oh yes, that one, and I'll find it on Discogs and pay someone $7 or something, and then I kind of ran out of those tapes I just stopped remembering. I kind of, rebought whatever I could remember. But then I kind of got into just buying new stuff too, because I was kind of, just starting to listen to a lot of like newer death metal stuff. And I was like, well, now I have all this metal stuff on tape. I should just kind of only buy metal on tape from now on, and just a whole collection. So
yeah.
But,
do you have a like a stereo tape deck, or do you have like a Walkman? Or
I found in a Facebook group, I found this lady who had an eBay account that she specialized in like rebuilding, refurbishing, cleaning up, replacing belts. Like she would just take apart specifically 90s Sony stuff, mostly Walkmans. So yeah, I bought some like refurbished Walkman that sounds great, and it's just kind of, I didn't want a component because I like just had a record player on top of my cabinet thing. So I was like, as long as it sounds good and it's working well, I'll just hide it behind the record player. And
right. Yeah. And do you remember, like, as a young kid buying tapes and having sort of like just diving into that world, especially like metal stuff, where you'd have just this tape and you didn't get the great artwork of like an LP, but you got this, the J card, and it was always cool if one folded out to 8 panels or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you have memories of that?
I do, and yeah, that's when you said that kind of struck a weird chord too. You did sort of feel like you struck gold when you would open it up the first time, and you're like, holy shit, it keeps going, because there was just going to be that much more content to absorb, which is what you do at that age. And I remember like a big one for me, and this is kind of like to that point that you made when we were chatting the other day about like death metal being a more kind of individual listening experience in those kind of Walkman, days where you would just have like 2 tapes in your bag, and then punk, which was a lot more of sort of a social experience. But yeah, I remember buying. I don't know why. I must have seen their name in a magazine or something, or I just liked it when I saw them when I saw the tapes. But Morgoth Cursed. And at the same, I also bought Resurrection Absurd and The Eternal Fall, which are like those two EPs kind of combined at the same time. But I don't remember really diving into that tape so much, because Cursed really just grabbed me. That was a big one. When my kind of I was more at the time. I was definitely more into thrash. At that age where I was into thrash and death, it was like kind of a 70-30 split. But the death metal bands that I loved were Morgoth, because of that album, which was, I remember like getting it and coming. It was in a mall, which our local mall, 163rd Street Mall in North Miami Beach. It was like built in, I don't know if it was like 70s or something, but had like the dark sort of clay tile everywhere and the planters in the middle of the mall with little jungles kind of growing out of them. And it felt very like Logan's Run Dome.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So I remember coming downstairs with the tapes, because the music store was on the second level, and then sitting on one of those planters in the middle of the mall and like unwrapping the tape and listening to it on a Walkman. And I remember just being like sort of devastated by it, because I like at the time, to me, death metal was basically like Entombed, Death, Obituary, just kind of that stuff. But I hadn't really heard anything that got like slow and just really plodding. It was just it was super, super moody. But that was one of those experiences that, like, I don't remember much from those days, but like I remember that planter and that first like spin of First, because it was just such a vibe as a kid.
Yeah, defining moment in your like musical history. And what were you listening to up to that point? Like the thrash.
Thrash. I was like, for the most part, kind of the big ones. I mean, I started with Anthrax, Metallica, Slayer. Well, yeah, I guess Megadeth too. Just throw them all in there. But also Destruction, Creator. My circle, we definitely dug some of the thrash that was happening in Europe at the time. But yeah, then there were a handful of death metal. I think the first death metal album I heard was that really like did anything for me was Entombed, Left Path.
Oh yeah, yep. That was probably mine as well. That or the Incomplete, or not the end, the one before that, the Obituary one before that.
Obituary is a band that this is kind of sacrilege, but especially because I know like I have a bunch of friends that love Obituary.
Yeah.
They're a band that for some reason, I think my exposure to them started with like their later stuff when they were already starting to be bitten by like that groove metal. Yeah, and I didn't want that. I mean, I didn't have anything against like bands like Pantera or whatever that were doing that at the time, but it's what I wanted from a death metal band wasn't that.
Yeah. That's such a terrible name for a genre too. Groove metal, isn't
Groove metal.
it?
Yeah. So I think that sort of tainted Obituary to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
Was that World Demise? I think that might.
Yeah, World Demise. That was the first one that was sort of. Yeah, they had that I Don't Care EP, I think, and then that
Yeah.
record. Now, did you stay with some of those bigger bands like Metallica, Anthrax, Megadeth, like through the '90s, or did you kind of drop off when they started changing their sounds, and then just more better underground and death and thrash stuff started coming up?
Yeah, that was basically it. Was like my sort of like crossing the line from metal stuff into pretty much turning my back on it for a while and just going like headfirst into hardcore, I guess. It kind of happened at the year that metal really started getting sort of shitty. So I never wondered if like it's that there was nothing interesting happening anymore over there. I always felt like I sort of abandoned it, but I like this theory better.
Yeah.
I didn't abandon it. It pushed me away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and just other bands just started doing more interesting stuff, and so I think Slayer was probably the only one that really kind of kept the flag flying, but even them, like, after a while, I just, I didn't really need to hear much more, and, I'll hear stuff here and there from later records, it's good, but I never spent much time after Divine Intervention, I guess, was probably where I kind of stopped. And
yeah, me neither. It was kind of Seasons and
yeah, that might even be more for now that I think about it.
Yeah, I think I had one. I had God Hates Us All.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure that I ever listened to it all the way through. I remember being like, it's still good. I mean, they're still aggressive and they're still angry and confrontational. They're still Slayer, even if the sound was changing up a little bit. I just didn't really care anymore. And I don't know. I think I don't know why there's an expectation that you would have to like the whole band's catalog, like an age with them, like they're the Stones or something. I don't need that from a metal band or a punk band. I need a good set of like two to four just like unfuckwithable releases, and then you can go.
Yeah.
Do your thing. Just leave this for us, and I don't know. Bands that I stuck with, no, I definitely jumped off the Metallica thing in '90. The day the Black Album came out, we had a little listening party at a friend's house, and we all walked away like choking back tears because you knew it was like, when people describe like, the day Kennedy was shot, just everything changed.
Right.
I feel like that was the day.
Yeah. It was a weird period for just a lot of music too, in the hardcore world as well.
Yeah. No, I didn't stick with any. Honestly, I just kind of, I was just like, all right, you know what? I don't give a shit about that stuff anymore. I care about this stuff now. And for many, many years, I mean, I was not interested in seeing what metal was up to these days. No part of me was so I still would, break out like Death albums or Slayer albums or Sepultura for sure, like throughout my life, but I didn't care what was happening in it currently because I didn't believe that it could possibly be good.
Right. Yeah. No, I have the same thing. I was like, I'm not buying Exodus albums through the '90s. I wasn't interested, or Testament. And now, like, Testament put out an awesome album a couple of years ago. A lot of these bands have been putting good stuff out again, so it's kind of cool to hear that happening. But like a Metallica or someone like that, I don't know, when they we're going back to our roots or whatever. Like, well, I don't know, those first 3 or 4, those roots are strong enough that I don't think you need to go back to them. Just
that you don't need to prove to us that you can still do it. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, exactly.
maybe you can. Should you?
Yeah,
You know, like even if they wrote a record that had like all of everything that those early albums had, like they played it just as well. They were just as like interesting. I don't know that it's going to have the same impact. It's not going to have the same. It just can't. You're a different organism.
yeah, and just the way people consume and listen to music nowadays too is different. Like there's no, I don't know, when an album was like coming out in like the late '80s or early '90s. When I was working at record stores, we did those midnight sales because people, couldn't wait till the next morning to hear. The Black Album was one of those. We had one of those for that, and so we had like a line around the corner at, starting at 10 o'clock for people waiting for us to reopen at midnight to sell.
Yeah, those were different days with like all the camping out for tickets and waiting for record stores to open and running to your friend's house to listen to. I don't know. I wonder how kids at that age now do it, because they have to do it in some way, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I go to record stores, now I do, in between like the older people like me in there's young people in there, especially like we have the chain out here, Newbury Comics, and it's geared towards young people, and you see a lot of younger kids, buying records, Turnstile and stuff like that, and I imagine they're doing the same thing, like,
Well, I wonder what more like just kind of your average adolescent, who's like necessarily in a like collecting records or anything, but just digs songs on the radio or whatever. But like, how are they? Because I mean, I guess we all knew kids who weren't. Well, it's probably safe to say like most kids were not into music the way that most of us were.
right, yeah,
At any point.
yeah,
But a lot were, and it's like even if they weren't in a nerdy kind of music subculture, and they were just like some dude that played sports and hung out with kids in his neighborhood, they had different connections to I don't know, fucking Don Henley or something.
right, yeah, their dad might have,
Yeah.
introduced them to the Cars or something, and that's like their band they love, but yeah, they're not like us where they're like, well, I need to buy 7 copies of Candio, these different pressings and colors and
Right.
stuff. So
Yeah, but they still have songs that choke them up, and
yeah,
that kind of thing is like, that's why I have to believe that kids today, even just kids that are fully digital and streamy and aren't spending that much face time with their friends because of their phones or whatever, they still have to be somehow like sharing music and consuming music in a meaningful way, and like passing it along to their friends. Because I think it's like it's not really a you're into it or you're not into it thing. I think it's like a biological imperative that is like part of the changes of adolescence, like neurologically, hormonally, or whatever. I think we have to connect with music that deeply and share it and want to like barter it, and I just think we have to, like, from any walk of life. So
yeah, it's cool when I see like guys on my men and women on my on social media that have kids, and they're bringing them to like see Judas Priest and stuff like that, and getting them into music. It's pretty cool to see that. So, and that's like what happened to me as a kid, So it's cool to have cool parents, and I think of that now as this whole generation of people like us that were in that world.
Yeah, it's like its whole own economy, it's parallel dimension, because you've got like bands failing and bands succeeding and labels killing it and labels with bad ears that are just, all right, well, that's why no one, that's why you guys didn't last that long or whatever. Like, it's a like dimension that parallels the real, the regular world. But but it's like completely like, or I don't know, was historically like kind of in the shadows and like off in the margins and, cash only under the table, just this whole like secret economy that was kind of nicely just like off the radar for the most part.
Yeah. It's
pretty cool. So I mean, everybody learned a lot.
Oh yeah.
It was, we had to build a civilization on an island in some way.
Yeah, I think that's an overlooked thing from like outsiders who just, hardcore kids, they're just going to shows to go in the pit and this and that. But, I think a lot of people, like you said, learned basic business models and, touring and, doing that kind of thing. But, it's funny to think of like a van full of like 16 and 17-year-olds and like youth of today, like traveling around the country in a van, or like, it's just weird to think without, before cell phones, and that kind of thing and maps, so you were literally like just fucking out there,
Yeah. And people's parents just letting them go out there like, with no cell phones and no maps. And I was like, I was already kind of, out of my house and not really on those kind of terms with my parents. So like but there were always people that I knew who like, maybe even were living at home and stuff, and their parents were just like stoked for them. And now that my kid's a long way from that age, but I'm like, I don't know that I would like, even with a fucking cell phone, like, I don't know that I want him driving all over the country with, 4 other people who just consistently make terrible decisions.
Right, exactly, yeah. No, I know, it's true. Yeah, my mother was letting us just go into the city at like 13, just take the train. You'd have like $20 to go buy, 3 records or something. And just to think, like, if I had a kid, when I see like my friends' kids that are 13, I imagine them like, would you let him go into like New York City? They'd be like, are you fucking crazy?
Yeah, and when we were 13, of course, we were like, we thought like, no, but I feel so much older and like, more independent, and I have this shit figured out. Don't be fooled by my age. I look at 15-year-olds and they look like 8.
I know. Well, I think that's part of like what like in the hardcore world, it did grow a lot of people up pretty quick because, especially the lyrical content of a lot of the bands you're listening to are, either social or political stuff that you never would have heard of,
That's a weird thing too, though, about hardcore is like you have a bunch of people attaching to these very sort of like big proclamations and convictions and, all of this very like heavy scholastic political adult kind of content or whatever. But meanwhile, like your body is like, you're still like this malformed, you're a fucking kid. And, there's a weird, I think, there were always those bands that like were trying to, there were always those kids for that matter, like just at school who were like, why are you trying to be old so soon? What's the rush? Why do you like, you just wanna, I don't know, go to college and start a family right out of the gate or whatever it is. But, and so I think there's this weird like tension because you want the world to know that like, not only are you're not a kid, you're not an idiot, you know how shit works, you have causes, and everybody should take you really seriously. But at the same time, you're like, this shit's for the youth and I'm going to stay young till I die. And I can't, be in a healthy relationship or friendship or anything because I'm such a fucking mess. But
right.
like,
yeah.
Here's my whole political, manifesto. To me, it's just, I don't know. I'm wary of all kind of sort of self-righteousness.
Yeah, of course.
Because I was very self-righteous because I generally just I don't like, whether it's like religious or political or whatever. I think just everybody just walking around so self-assured and just positive that like they have the message.
Yeah, they get it figured out, and this is
and
the way to do this. You're not doing shit right. You should be doing it like this.
Right. Yeah, and it just I think it's great. Like, I just wish I wish that somebody had just been like, dude, just be a kid.
Yeah.
Just fucking be a kid. Like, if you don't want to drink or do drugs, great. Just be a kid that doesn't drink or do drugs. Hell, claim straight edge, but like, you don't have to. When it starts getting into all this sloganeering and these lifelong conviction, it's the same shit you feel when you see that shit on cars where they're just like boasting about dying for their country and all this shit. Like, but you don't have to die for anybody, dude.
Yeah, you can just be a
fucking
dude.
Sit down.
Yeah, just be a guy.
yeah. Like, none of us have to die for any causes or carry the torch into our graves or fucking anything. None of this matters. We're all gonna die.
I know I have friends still that are like in their 50s and they're still doing that whole like, oh, I don't like, anything popular and this, and they're still like, and I'm like, geez, just most of the time I'd rather just not have that conversation. I'd rather talk about stuff with a positive tip, like, and see like, hey, oh, that's cool. Like you listen, like listing a lot of that stuff you listen to during the week on Facebook, when I saw Supertramp, I was like, oh shit, because that was like an important record to me as a kid, and so it was cool to see, because it's like not something you expect to see people like listening to Supertramp. No one really wants to admit that, but that's a fucking good album.
That's, man, and that's a new one for me, relatively, but yeah, it was a big one in my wife's house when she was growing up. So, like, a lot of those songs were, all over classic rock radio too, but so I was familiar with some of the songs. I knew those were Supertramp songs. I knew what Supertramp sounded like, and Bloody Well Right, and what, like, got it. It's good. I don't need to own an album. I think I got picked. Nothing against them, just never bothered on the record. And then she put that on one day, and I was just like, holy shit, it's such a pristine recording, and not in that way that, like, it's perfect, but not in like an REO Speedwagon kind of like, sounds synthesized kind of, it's just like simple instrumentation and a really simple recording, but the mix is just like fucking crazy. I was into like, I don't know, Electric Light Orchestra and other shit, like from my mom, who was in, but Supertramp was just kind of one of those, I don't think my dad didn't have rock kind of record at all, but my mom did. I don't think there was any Supertramp.
Yeah. So this record, getting back to the Ekstasis thing, is coming out tomorrow, right? Or this Friday, the 28th.
Yeah.
And if people wanted to order it or listen to it, where would they be able to do that?
They can. There's an Unspeakable Acts Records Bandcamp. I think that's, from what I can tell, that's the easiest place to order it. I don't know if it has us on like the label's website itself yet, but yeah.
No, I was gonna say, I'm with Fred in the band, or playing with you. Do you guys have any plans to play live at any point?
I think the idea is that we at some point would, but right now we're just like, yeah, let's get this thing out here and work on LP and figure out like who would even be in this thing if we did do stuff, and then figure out what kind of stuff we could even do. But yeah, the album is because Dave is such a machine. He just like he kept writing after those ones, and now there are 8 or 9 songs already. So I think like the album is pretty much ready. But with Fred coming in, I think that Fred had a very heavy role in Dismember's kind of arrangements and stuff. He's done a number of his own projects and just has a knack for arrangement and a knack for just kind of mixing and stuff like that too. So we're basically just turning those songs over and just being like, what do you hear? So we thought they were done. We're okay with them as they are, but like, here's a chance to have someone who's probably much better.
Polishing them.
Yeah. So yeah, he's going to kind of weigh in on those, and then we'll start tracking the real instrument, or it might just be the drums that we need to replace, maybe bass.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's been fast and easy, and it's kind of fun. I had been doing this like drug toilet. Did I ever send you that stuff?
Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, and that was like just that kind of like really feral, rabid, just get gross kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
And I kind of wanted to still bring a little bit of that into this, but it's a much more controlled.
Yeah, a little more subtle here. Definitely.
Yeah.
And do you have other stuff that you're still doing musically besides this? Like, is the Damien Done project still like an ongoing thing, or?
Yeah, in fact, we finished an album early last year, and it just took so long to get going once it was mixed.
Right.
To get it started, and then once it finally did go off to press, it's just the longest we've ever had to wait for records, and so it should be out, I think, May of next year. There's a new Damien Done LP that I think is definitely the best stuff yet. I'm pretty excited to. We're supposed to start sharing some songs, videos, or whatever soon.
Nice. Yeah,
but
I love that stuff.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I think you'll dig this one. I think it's a lot more cohesive.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. And then As Friends Rust is also we're currently recording a new album, which will be like our first full length. Well, our second full length ever, but our first full length since 2001.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy, huh?
Yeah.
And do you find it important to have like multiple, avenues like this to like express, different, sides of your personality or sides of your creative sides of yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think anybody that makes music in some way is just kind of you even if you're trying to write stuff that is, you're not one of those people that's like, I want to be in a band just like this band, and you kind of think them, which is fine. There's a lot of that kind of like modern version of blank band that I love. Even if you are trying to do something that's completely like unpigeonholable to some extent, even subconsciously, you're paying homage to the music that shaped you.
Yeah, of course.
It's kind of like, what goes in it's gonna find a way out somehow. So I feel like much in the way that Ekstasis is like, we want to play the kind of music that we loved at like 14. I feel like every band like Damien Done it's the same thing. It's just a different time and place, or kind of, it's a combination of kind of, I think it's paying homage to stuff I was into even before I was an adolescent into metal. Just the stuff that resonated with me on the radio was always kind of the darker, new wavy, Billy Idol, Cars, kind of. But that had that weird, that sort of in the air tonight sort of like
that thick sort of dark air.
Yeah.
To it.
Yeah. The shit where like all the videos had like blue lighting and like steam coming out of manholes and shit.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Damien Done, there's a part of me that like I think is paying homage to that shit, and then the stuff that like later I went deep on that was kind of the extension of that, like all the Jesus and Mary chain and shit like not the stuff you would hear on the school bus like radio, but yeah. And then As Friends Rust was also in its own way kind of a similar thing where we were trying to just pay homage to the kind of more melodic hardcore or post-hardcore or indie kind of stuff that we liked. So there was this weird dag nasty super chunk kind of mashup in our minds anyway.
But. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing this Ekstasis band sort of grow into something in here, like a full length, and see what you guys do next with it. Should be pretty cool.
Thanks.
Yeah,
man. It's kind of not to prolong the
no.
It's kind of it's a fun thing because it's a very like balance. I'm realizing kind of like how much I was missing by just not just being in fucking metal bands all these years.
Yeah.
Because there's something, I guess it comes back to just like being free of just generally speaking, being free of like dogma and message.
Yeah.
Is very liberating.
Yeah, you can be a little more anonymous with this kind of stuff too, in a way,
Yeah. It's fun, and it's just you can sort of get a little more dramatic. Like I didn't like drama in hardcore.
Yeah,
I know. It's all about like that shit is all pretentious, and this is not about pretense. But in metal, it's like, oh yeah, there's an appreciation for like character. Like fuck who you really are. Like what's the character that you're gonna paint? For us. So it's kind of fun to just like, I guess, like have fewer rules.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. Cool. Awesome, man. Well, again, thanks. And yeah, like I said, I look forward to hearing this, and hopefully people will check out this new stuff that's out now.
Yeah. Oh, I guess it can also, if you don't have luck at the Unspeakable Acts Bandcamp, we have one too. That's Ekstasis Death Bandcamp, whatever. Nice. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, I will.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Of course.
All right. Awesome.
Have a good night, Damien.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Till I die.